Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Atoll for Malby. Atoll is a 1-to-4 player tableau building, ecological system building game in which across 4 rounds of play, you're trying to get as many points as possible through building out the best little ecology going on here. I have set up right now 2 different players over here, but I'm started already as middle of the first round. The game is going to take place across 4 rounds of play as tracked over here, which we'll get back to there with our tourists and our scientists and all these other things. But basically, you're going to be trying to gather as many coral reefs as possible and placing them into your system. You're also going to be buying as many animals as possible and placing those into your system. They all have requirements, we'll get to them soon, but basically everything gives you the opportunity to score points. It's how you mix and match it that's going to determine whether you win or come in second, or third, or fourth place in the game. Basically what you're going to do is on your turn, and I do have it set up midway through the first round over here, but on your turn you're going to take any number of the actions as long as you can afford to do so. You're going to buy corals, putting them into your reefs. Corals and animals are going to share this checkerboard pattern, as you can see over here, where I can buy another coral and place it out over here, or I can buy another animal and place it out over here, for example, or here, or here, or here, but an animal will not go over here. You're going to have a checkerboard pattern between the corals and the animals. You're going to pay the cost of the coral. For example, the cost is going to be 2 in the top corner over here. You're going to place it into your board, and then they either have immediate effects, end of game effects, or sometimes actions, as you can see on these cards over here. End of game effects are going to be scoring 2 points for every large fish on your atoll being the reef that you're building. Immediate effects, something like this, is going to be removing a pollution. You start with the pollution on one of your cards, so you want to remove those whenever you have a chance to do so. That's going to be beneficial there. Then we have actions. This lets you remove a fatigue cube from one of my species over here, which can help me go ahead and build them up further, because as you elevate your species to the next levels, it's going to fatigue them, and you're going to have to wait till next turn, but if you remove fatigue cubes, you can get that going faster for your board. That's going to be the basic coral purchase action. An animal purchase action is similar. You're spending coins. The only difference there is you also have a number of reefs it needs to be adjacent to. So for example, this animal over here needed to be adjacent to 2 reefs, so it's able to be right over here where you're adjacent to these 2 reefs. Over here, on the other hand, you have animals that need to be adjacent to 1 reef, so they can all be here, even though there's only 1 reef, as opposed to other reefs going around them. So that's the main difference with the animals. Past that, when you buy an animal, you're going to put a little star token on its lowest star value, and you do have the option of feeding your animals, getting them higher over here, and each animal has a different feeding requirement of how to do so. But when you feed an animal, you're going to go ahead and move this up. You're going to fatigue the animal so you can't do it again, although again, certain things will let you do that, although you can't benefit from them as long as the pollution is on them. And then you're going to go ahead and follow whatever feeding requirement they have. So for example, this one simply wants to go ahead and eat some plankton, and then you can go ahead and move it up. Other species will have different ways that they feed. There's going to be this concept of species that are linked species, symbiote species, that are going to raise up their feeding in combination with others. You'll have species that eat other animals, lowering their value, although there are ways to avoid that with sheltered animals. There's also ways to use your hunt token to hunt another player's species. Although this game is friendly, they don't actually suffer the negative effect. It's just that if you needed that one card, if you needed a particular card to eat, you can do so when your opponents have so. Well, at least once per round you can do that. Outside of that, you can take any coral actions, and you can also deal with any coral colony growth, which can be these tokens over here, which can add to further elements of coral to them, and there's a few ways to get those into the game. You're going to be taking all of those actions as long as you could afford to do so. In the first round, afford to do so is not going to last you very long, but that's where we can get to the end of round sequence, where you can either have tourists or scientists visit your coral, visit your atoll. Scientists are going to give you less money, but tourists give you more pollution, so you have to decide what is more important for you and what is your atoll set up to deal with more. Do you need additional currency? Can you deal with the pollution? Pollution will stop effects from happening, as well as stop endgame scoring from happening on those reefs, so you're trying to figure out what's going to be more beneficial to yourself. Additionally, as to note, there's also support actions you can take during the round. You can mark these. Every player is going to have their own player aids, and you can mark these spots with these tokens whenever you take any of the support actions, which is water purification, which lets you pay money to get rid of any tourists over there, to get rid of any pollution, although you will not be able to have tourists visit that round if you do so. We have seaweed scale, which you can get rid of plankton in order to get money, and there's algal bloom, which you can go ahead and add pollution in order to get seaweed. So there's a few currency kind of exchanges going on there to allow you to manage the efficiency of your atoll. That is primarily what's going on in the base game. There's a few other steps. I didn't really go through the recovery steps. You'll take income, income, you remove the fatigue tokens from your board, you gain plankton from the number of colonies you have. So for example, over here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'll get 2 plankton. If it's over here, he has 4, so he'll get 1 plankton right now. You reset any hunt tokens. Like I said, these are once per round, so you can flip them back over there. You can refresh the card offers, getting rid of the 2 cards that are the rightmost that have not been taken. And then you can move the starting player from player to player, and then move the token on the round board to the next round. You're going to do that until you reach the end of the game, at which point you'll score for how well all your species have developed throughout the game, as well as for any endgame points you have on the various coral you have added to your atoll. And that is basically how you play the main game over here. There's 2 small modifications to the game that you can add. You don't have to, but there's an event deck over here. You can have events in rounds 1 to 3. These will be either be immediate events that affect everyone right away, or alternatively events that affect the round of the game for the rest of the round. Or alternatively, there's also another scoring modification for biodiversity, where there's a different way of scoring, where you're going to want to be paying a bit more attention to the various species you have in the game in order to get extra points. But both those are optional modules you can include. And then there's a solo mode as well, which is just basically a race against yourself. There's a few modifications. You don't have the events, you do have biodiversity scoring, and then you're going to go ahead and check your score against a little chart in the rulebook to see how well you did. That is how you played Atoll, which brings us to my review of what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like. Starting off with what I like over here, the game does ramp up nicely towards the end as you get it. The game's going to start off very tight. Your first round, you're going to get like 1 or 2 things bought, and then you're going to be like, I'm all out of resources. All out of resources is not a lot I can do. But the game will scale up nicely as you start to build more and more things that work together, that tangent off another, give each other abilities, and let you actually expand your coral. It's also going to give you more interlinked species reliances that are going to happen in the game that give you a lot more choice or thought, a lot more thinkiness to the game in the later rounds compared to what you're going to see in the first rounds. The first rounds, you feel kind of stuck. You're going to be looking at a market. You're going to be trying to buy cards. Half the time you're buying cards based on other cards they might need that aren't even in play yet, and you don't know if they'll come into play, so you're kind of hoping that it's all going to come together, and then sometimes it does, and you get to that end game and you have a lot more going on. You have to manage your ecosystem as far as how well things play off of one another. You might want to build one way, but if the card market doesn't allow it, you do have to adapt to that. And the game's also not mean. Like, even when it comes to eating, another species, whether your own or somebody else's, first of all, somebody else's, they don't reduce theirs at all. So that's kind of like a nice way to be like, I'm gonna eat your fish, and you can keep your fish too, don't worry about it. Or alternatively, with yourself, there's some cards, let me see if any have over here, there's some cards that have shelter icons over here, and shelter icons will stop those fish from being eaten, even when they're eaten, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like a free lunch. It's literally like, you know that expression, there's no such thing as a free lunch? There's literally such a thing as a free lunch in this game. There's two kinds of free lunches in this game. As far as things I don't like in the game, first of all, I talked about it already a little bit, but the dependencies on which cards come out is a big deal in the game. Very often you'll be buying cards because you need them to be dependent on others, a specific species they'll need to eat to grow, and those cards might not come out. Like, sometimes there's only like a handful of cards in the game that are actually a good fit for another card. I think I actually have one out over here. These cards over here, these are symbiotes of each other, and if there's only 4 of these in the game, there's only 4 of these crab species in the game, or 6, or sorry, there's only 4 of these beetlet anemones in the game, which kind of leaves you stuck sometimes in terms of how things can play off of each other. There are a lot of dependencies, both in terms of general strategy of what will come out, as well as specific species dependencies that might just leave you stuck if those things don't come out early enough in the game to benefit from them. Additionally, as much as the end game does get more interesting with the layered decisions because of your atoll growing in complexity, that also can lead to a little bit of analysis paralysis. In those later rounds of the game, sometimes trying to manage it all as efficiently as possible because you have a lot of actions you're trying to juggle, a lot of things that are interdependent, and it can be a little bit more AP prone in those later rounds. I'll also say that the end game scoring does seem kind of lackluster for me. Like, a lot of the cards you get that give you points for things from these corals, they're not a ton of points for those things. They do feel a little bit lackluster. More often than not, I'm buying them because I need them anyways in my atoll, and then I'm just trying to choose the thing that will give me the most points while I'm doing so. But it's rare that I was like looking at any one of these cards and be like, oh, I really need that card. That's going to be really helpful to my engine. No, I need those cards in general. And from there, I try to figure out which one is most beneficial for me. And then lastly, I'll say that the graphic design doesn't pull me in both visually as well as mechanically. I feel it's not the most obvious at any given point. These symbols are very, very small in these top corners over here, which again, you only need them when you're buying things, but nonetheless, I would say looking at your atoll at a glance and seeing what's going on, that's not an experience I have. So both from a pure level of interest in the game, visually the game doesn't pull me in as much, but also mechanically, I find it hard to kind of look and process right away the way I I would ideally like from a system like this, which is part of what leads to that AP slowdown in those later rounds. As far as final thoughts on Atoll, I wanted to like this game because I tend to like these kinds of games, these kinds of ecosystem games, where you're building something up and you're combining it all together, you're trying to figure out how one thing flows into the other, you're trying to maximize your point scoring. I tend to appreciate those games because of the linked togetherness of everything. For Atoll, this one kind of left me falling flat in numerous areas, both from the way the game looks to begin with, which again is not a deal breaker for me, but I just don't think either the box cover or the cards didn't pull me in as much as I would like. But then far more importantly than that, there's lots of things that just didn't feel, there wasn't a strong selling point of what's happening here that is done better than another game in the genre, and a lot of small things held it back, from the graphic design accessibility to the fact that a lot of things don't come together as smoothly or as satisfyingly as I would like. At the end of the day, it's not bad, but it also wasn't particularly great for me either. I think, like, for me, I'm coming in at a 2.5 out of 5. I can't tell if I'm being a little harsher on this, but this is the tricky part. The game's not bad, and part of me almost wants to give it a 3, but I just think there's so many games that do what Atoll is doing, and they do them so much more, in such a more satisfying way, that to me this kind of felt just not as good as other games, in a way that ultimately I'm going to come in at a 2.5 out of 5. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, if you want a game that's going to have a nice little, in fact, 2 games that have nice ecosystems going on with a lot more scoring combinations going on, check out the Savannah system. Savannah, or I think it's the ecosystem, the Savannah. I'm trying to remember the name of the system. It's Ecosystem Savannah, Ecosystem something, I don't know. Check out Savannah. Savannah Ecosystem is a game that is going to have a lot of card play, interlinked things that give you a lot of point scoring optimization, and overall I thought did the entire package of this much better. And then if you want a game that has you eating various species, both your own and others, for points, check out the Nature system. It's based on evolution, but Nature is the newest evolution of that system that I definitely recommend checking out if you liked linked ecosystems and what they do. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this review helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.